There's going to be increased motor activity, increased impulsiveness. One mother told me, it's Danny on rocket fuel. And it's a good expression. Talkativeness. Now, I read one paper, I won't mention the author unless you make me, but where he said that the child who had not been verbal at all suddenly started talking and was vivacious. And this was written as a good thing.
Now, who was the author?
And aggression. A study done by my colleague Chris McDougall showed that 14 out of 18 children randomized to fluvoxamine got aggressive. And this was a study that probably will never be published, but he did over 10 years ago. He did about 15 years ago, before we caught on to this. So, so there's a study, this one's in the handout, 39 children. They use a crossover design. Why, I don't know, but I'm only going to talk about the first arm, where half the kids got fluoxetine and half of them got placebo. So that's, you know, roughly 20 kids per group. You can see that they're mostly boys, as you would expect, mostly autism, big IQ range, and wide range of this, which probably hurt them, because there are some kids who, with autism, they'll get a score of 8 even if repetitive behavior is not a problem. So it's not going to go down. Here are the results. So you have over on your left fluoxetine baseline and endpoint, placebo baseline and endpoint, and you can see that the active treatment group improves about 10%, and the placebo group improves about 4%. Net difference 6%. Now what they did find out is that by using a slow upward adjustment of the medication, they did avert the activation. So there is some usefulness to the study. So then there was this. Neuropharm is a British company. They developed a new formulation of fluoxetine. It's a melt-in-your-mouth fluoxetine. And they went to the FDA and got orphan drug pathway approved. So what that means is that the threshold of proof of efficacy and safety is much lower than it would be otherwise. And they conducted a study of 158 children, and this is their news release. Neuropharm Group announces a phase 3 SOPHIA study is what they called it, of this melt-in-your-mouth fluoxetine in autistic disorder was no different. I like the way they put this. Did not achieve its primary endpoint. No difference between drug and placebo. A novel formulation of fluoxetine was generally well tolerated by patients, and there were no serious adverse events. 158 patients. That's the biggest study in autism so far. It didn't work. It did not separate from placebo. If you go on the website and you look around a bit, you'll find that the placebo response was, if you just count responders, in the low 30s. The response to the active drug in the low 30s. So this is not a question of didn't quite meet significance. This is not, it did not work. So we finished a study. This study is now in press. I'm going to show you the results, but it's not in your handout. So we had 149 children, 5 to 17. This is 5 sites involved in the study. And we used the CGI, the overall global impression, for our primary outcome, and then we used this measure of repetitive behavior, which is a clinician interview. This is a slide from the paper these are unpublished data, so that's why it's not in your handout. But you can see it doesn't matter. I'll tell you that there's nothing there. There's nothing there. And look at they come in. You notice in the Hollander study, the range was 8 to 18 on this same measure. Most of these guys were at a solid mean around 15. Nothing there. And on the CGI, the percentage of kids called much improved or very much improved, which is the standard way of calling a responder. But now I'm going to call a spade, if you know what I'm saying. The black line and the red line are basically, so this is not a case of a few more subjects and it might have made a difference.
And this is CGI on everything. It's not just looking at repetitive.
I'm glad you said that. We were open to the idea that some other benefit could have washed over this kid, right? And in fact, we asked the parents at the beginning of the study, what's the biggest problem? And they would say stuff like, he doesn't manage transitions, or he's rigid, right? So it's not exactly a repetitive behavior, is it? So it was kind of weighted for repetitive behavior, W-E-I-G-H-T, weighted, right? But it was, the clinicians were wide open to accept some other benefit, not there.
The previous one was a white box? Or
yeah, the Children's Yale Brown. This is a scale that we modified for PDD. It only contains the compulsions, not the obsessions.
Did you do any social relatedness type measures?
We have some data like that. I'm really doubtful. So what about the adverse effects? This is the only thing that was different for drug and placebo. And I've yanked these out as the ones that were significantly different. Significantly different at 0.05. Now, stop and think for a minute. You could see the numbers here, right? This is a study of 150 children, 75 roughly. To get significance in an adverse effect, you gotta have, it's got to be pretty lopsided. And that's what you see here. Increased energy, evidence of that activation, 28 to 15. Increased impulsiveness, 14 to 5. Decreased concentration. Generally, that was, the mother would say the kid is all over the place. Increased hyperactivity. Increased stereotypy. Doesn't help stereotypy. Some kids, it's going to make it worse. That's a package deal to me. And many of the kids had multiple of these things, right? So this is counting episodes of these behaviors. Many kids had several.
Are you guessing this would be the same for all the SSRIs?
I don't see any reason to doubt it. So I just put that there to say those are adverse effects. Conclusion, I don't think there's any evidence to support the use of these drugs in this. You could hold out for the use of it for the treatment of anxiety. It hasn't been done yet. Some daring person will probably do it, and they probably should. So I'm going to go fast now because we're running out of time. But I want to go to work that we just finished with risperidone plus behavioral treatment. So here's the deal, the report card on the antipsychotics. Again, not very many studies over 40. So in our first trial, I think you know this one, and it's in the handout. I'm just going to go right to the results. There was a big effect for tantrums, aggression, self-injury for risperidone versus placebo. This is good news. It contributed to the drug being approved for the treatment of autism, children who have tantrums, aggression, self-injury. And the other thing we showed is that the effects were steady over 6 months for responders, and we didn't have to increase the dose to maintain the response. The dose is about 2 milligrams a day, and I think oftentimes you can get away with less. So that's where we started. I mentioned about the weight gain. I can't go without mentioning that. Right now, this is the largest study that where there are data on 6 months of follow-up. You can see the weight gain is 5.6 kilos over 6 months. That's about 12 pounds. Pediatricians would probably know this better than me, but in this age group, we might expect a 3 or 4 pound weight gain. So this is a lot of weight gain. Clearly something that has to be monitored. So one of the things that we decided to do was to see if for lots of reasons that we can talk about if you're interested. We wanted to see